Anybody remember that old movie, Good Morning Vietnam? I don't know if that's gonna, nobody remembers that old movie, Good Morning
Oh
Vietnam.
yeah, I remember it.
Who was the star of that movie, if you remember it then?
That was Robin Williams.
That's right. Good old Robin Williams, the belated. Sad story, but what a wonderful talent that was. And what a wonderful talent all of you are today. Had a little chance to mingle with some of you on LinkedIn and with some of the alumni as well. So we're going to keep that growing again. We're going to create that online community as well. Thank you for those that were participating in there and have connected with me and your facilitators on LinkedIn. That's a great tool and a great way asynchronously to interact, not just with our own community, but with the extended community that we're going to slowly bring back in and revive and let them know we're here and we're alive and we want to talk to them and stuff like that. Today, we're going to start off the day with our Scrum sessions this morning. I'm going to assume that you had a chance to access your Scrum slide deck template online and that you have put some input in there to share with us today and your instructors. You will be playing that right there online as a presentation. You might get creative and some of you might have downloaded, but we want to make sure that you're making your changes there and that the instructor is able to see what you're doing. If it doesn't work for you today, our workaround is your instructor will play the slide deck for you and you will go ahead and present and just there's nothing wrong with saying next slide, next point, please, or whatever. For the Scrum sessions, there is a reason why we ask for a very specific way of interacting, and it requires some input and commitment for you as well. It's not just the instructors that are moving this along, they are kind of the MCs, but everybody is part of this conversation during Scrum. And so what you want, the best way to kind of participate there is you will know your order, your batting order for who's presenting at what time. Your facilitators will have created a list for that. They'll throw it in the chat if you don't remember. And then a second row of people, a second renumbering. Basically, if you're the first one, the second person in the list is asking the first question. Who has the first question? Who has the first question? And then once you ask that question, that's the obligatory question. So you're listening and you're looking for that question you want to ask, and so that you can kind of get that person thinking about something that you noted. Try and throw an affirmation in there. I think people don't get enough building up kind of language, so we want to make sure and affirm people that they're doing good in things that they're doing good. Then who has the next question? That's an optional. That means that if anybody else has a question that they really would like to ask that participant, they can. The facilitators will close off with a bit of advice each time, or some facilitators wait till the very end and they write down their notes and just kind of close it off with everything they want to say about everything. Lots of great crosstalk can happen here. Carry that over into Henry's presentation later after the Scrum session. That same attitude of writing down questions, putting your digital hand up and asking questions, throwing questions into the parking lot, which is the chat session, so that we can kind of cover off those questions as we go. The last question writing piece. If there's a question that you feel later on during the mentor pool Q&A that you could be asking some of the mentors, I would suggest that you're writing those down along the way too as they come to mind. So whenever you get a little bit of a download and you think of a question, sometimes what will happen is the instructor will say, that's a great question to ask the mentors, and we'll park it for a while and bring it back. Rosalie, you're emceeing the mentor pool today?
Yep.
So Rosalie will also be jotting down or have a few questions in her back pocket just in case things slow down. That momentum that we get from question and answering all the way through drives this and makes it a lot more engaging and interactive. So Henry, he will rein it in if he needs to, so he can keep it within time, but I'm sure Henry would love to hear some of your questions along the way. The rest of us will be helping out too. Rosalie, go for it.
Yes. So, Amanda, just to let you know, as co-hosts, we can't co-host. So I just looked. So, everyone, I think as facilitators, we're going to have to drive your presentations. So if you haven't uploaded them back into Google Docs under your team folder, and I can see that some of mine haven't, please do that so I can access them and I can drive your folders or drive your presentations during our breakout sessions.
All right, so we'll correct that with a little bit of experimentation after today's session. Make sure that happens differently next time and you have the driver's seats. But give it a try today. Yes, this is like a startup. We're always iterating, always kind of adjusting. So that's great. That's all the way. That's exactly very realistic to the entrepreneurial lifestyle. So go with it. Go with the flow and adjust every time. The words that I like to use, and I said it this morning, is relentlessly resourceful. You have to be relentlessly resourceful in the way that you operate when you're an entrepreneur. You're always agile, you're always able to take risks, and you're able to adjust in the moment, because that's the kind of lifestyle it is, basically, and that's the way we operate. I think that's it. I don't want to say any more. I just want to kick these off. Again, questions. Let's hear from you and have great conversations in your breakout rooms.
So we'll send you off to the breakout rooms. So if the first person presenting wants to try to share their screen, see if that works in the breakout room. If not, then the facilitators can share the presentations if you put them in the team folders. So we'll send you off.
It's okay if it's a little clunky today, guys. We'll make it work.
Okay, we'll see you in a bit.
Way too loud.
Volume down.
We're all awake. We're here.
All right, so we're going to jump right into it. So Henry will take the reins here. I want to encourage everybody to use or find your voice. I'm a firm believer in active learning as opposed to passive learning. So put your digital hand up, ask your questions along the way. Henry will rein those in as he needs to. If you are a shy one, you can throw your questions into the parking lot, which is the chat. Andrea and Rosalie will interact with you there. If they need to bring a question to the front for Henry, they will alert him. Let's keep this active. Henry, you're on.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Coming to you from beautiful Washington, D.C. So there might be some noise because I'm right in Chinatown. So there's a lot of activities here in D.C. So with that, so today we'll cover customer segments and market sizing. So I know during the pre-program, we talked a lot about customers, value proposition, and then how actually to give you the tools necessary to actually get you guys going in your interview journey. So starting on the core program, we'll go deeper into each of those contents we provided during the boot camp. So for today, we have about an hour and 20 minutes. We'll keep it interactive. So if you have any questions, please stop me. I only have one screen, so it'll be hard to identify if somebody raises their hand. So if you have a question, just stop me. It'll be a lot easier than if you raise your hand and I'm trying to reach you. Okay, so with that, here's agenda. So we'll cover problem, solution fit, customer segmentation, a little bit more details on what we covered in during the boot camp. We'll identify early adopters, stakeholders, and persona. So I know these are all topics covered, but we'll go into a little bit more detail, have some exercises during the session today, and during the exercises you'll do with your peers during some community building. So that's what we'll cover. Okay, starting with finding problem, solution, fit. So we talked a lot about the customer development process, right? So in your journey, start with customer discovery, identify problem, solution fit, propose the minimum viable product, and then propose funnel. So that's the discovery of the customers. After that, customer validation, you'll find a product market fit. What is the business model? And then lastly, sales and marketing roadmap. So this is essentially making a decision, are you going to go solve that problem with your technology? Then after you've actually created a product, right? So next step, customer creation, right? So talk about scale execution, sales, etc. And lastly, building a company, scale the organization, and scale operations. So that's your journey into the customer development process. First step, really testing whether your value proposition fits within a specific customer segment. Covered that, I think, in day 2. So go a little deeper during the core program. And then essentially, what is this thing that you're looking for? Matching a value proposition with your customer, with a specific customer segment. So those 2 arrows really supposed to mean part of your business model canvas. And then the stronger your value proposition, the stronger your possibility to scale your business. So that's essentially finding the problem solution fit, product market fit, whatever you want to call it, is where your value proposition connects very directly with each of the customer segments you've identified. And the key thing is the value proposition matches a customer segment, right? So don't try to match one value proposition for all customer segments. So if you have a specific value proposition per segment, the better it is. So you can also find a notion of that in your value proposition canvas, right? So we covered on the right side, we talked about your customer, right? So what are the gains that they're looking for? What are the pains in what they're going through in the day-to-day jobs? And then what jobs they're trying to do. And on the left side, now talking about your solution. So what are the gain creators? What gains does your product create? What pain does it relieve? And of course, it lists all the products and services and solutions that you're providing to your customers, right? So same thing on the value proposition canvas, right side, your customers, what they're going through and the jobs they're trying to perform. On the left side, what is the technology providing to them? What gain does it create? And what pain does it relieve? So it gets you to essentially, once you're confident, it tests the rest of the business model and develop a repeatable sales process, right? So that's your product market fit. You have a technology that solves their problems, that meet their needs, and that's really what they call a product market fit. Great marriage, and then essentially people self-adopt, ideally. So that's really what you're trying to go after. You've identified a market, identify their needs, identify their pains and their gains, and then your solution matches that perfectly. That's really product market fit. So dig a little deeper into customer segments. So this is just a repeat of what we did. So as you're trying to define your customer segments, right, to start with finding a problem solution fit, question you need to ask yourself, who is your target customer? Who are you targeting? What are you trying to do? Which is, what are the jobs they're trying to perform? What's the problem they're encountering as they're trying to do their jobs, right? So this is what we call the pain. And then for what gains would they be willing to pay for, right? And then lastly, the last 2 questions, does your solution solve their problem? And then does your solution bring additional value to their lives? That's really what you're trying to identify, in your customers, with your customers, right? So identify their jobs. So you do need to go live in their shoes and understand what they're trying to do. Because sometimes it's not very intuitive. What are they trying to do? What are the pains they're going through, right? So for a nurse, having to stand at the nursing station, identify what the patients are going through, right? So that's a pain. And then what are they trying to do? So you take a nurse, for example, they're trying to manage the flow of patients and manage criticality of what the patients are going through, and then making a decision on who to treat, and how to escalate if necessary. And then for what gains would they be willing to pay for? Because there are some gains that are not relevant to your customers. So you need to know what's important, and would they be actually willing to pay for the additional value you might be creating. Okay, so those are the things really around identifying what your customers are doing, what's their pain, and what's their gain. Customer segmentation, right? So I always find these things a little funny, so try and put some humor into it. So Every time I ask my marketing team, what's your marketing plan? Well, I'm doing. So clearly, you can't criticize somebody's customer marketing plan if they actually don't have one. Straight from marketer. Before you segment your customers, you need to know what the actual market is. And you'll find it interesting that the majority of people actually struggle to actually define the market. Can't define your market. You can't segment, you can't target, and then obviously you can't actually go do any customer discovery. So you need to be clear, what is your market? First step, what is a market? A set of actual or potential customers for a given set of product or services. That's the first step in defining a market. And those potential customers, they have a common set of characteristics, needs, or wants. And lastly, my screen is kind of blurred, sorry, who reference each other when making a buying decision. So those are the three things that define a market, right? So for example, if you're going to sell imaging equipment, like say large imaging equipment, your market is actually hospital. Now, a similar imaging equipment that actually could be tested in physicians' offices, now your market is actually primary care providers. See, same product, the use defines its markets. So you need to be clear, who are these people? And then who's likely to use it? Because that changes the market, right? So for example, an imaging device, a large imaging device, US market, about 5,700 hospitals. Now for a product used by primary care providers, there's 300,000 primary care providers in the US, right? So see the scale of a difference if you define your market incorrectly. So it's critically important that you go through those three things to identify what is my market. Second one, customers. So what is a customer? It seems intuitive. We can define what is a customer, but it's really worth going through what is a customer. It's a set of actual or potential customers for a given set of products or services. And then now trying to segment, right? So you define your market, who are my customers, and then you segment those customers, because obviously you can't market to each one of them individually. You need to be able to segment, understand which one's more important, which one's a priority, and what are the drivers that really impact the decision making. So a customer segment, as we covered during the boot camp, so different groups of people or organization you aim to reach and serve. So that's what we call definition of a customer segment. Market, we talked about that, right? So everyone you can provide value to, or any real or potential customer for your products or services. And a segment is your market as a group based on common characteristics, right? So either based by geography, by psychographics, etc., which we'll cover in a second. Any questions so far about defining your market, identifying your customer, and segment your customers, right? So 3 easy steps. And the last one, obviously, market sizing, right? So define your market, super important. Identify who the customers are in that market, and then segment your customers. We do segmentation, many ways to do segmentation. Most people do geographic because it's easy, right? So my segment is Winnipeg is one segment, Brandon segment 2, and I guess Selkirk, that tells you how terrible my geography of Manitoba is, but you can do by geography, you can do by demographics, right? So you see these ones all the time when you fill surveys, right? So people 2 to 5, 2 to, I don't know, 9, 10 to 19, 19 to 26, 26 to 35, etc. Right? So that's a demographic type segmentation. You can do by gender, income, occupation, etc. Right? So these things tend to be more visible, right? So geography, demographics are visible, right? So you can tell if somebody fits within that segment or not much more easily. Next one is behavioral, right? So this one's a little bit harder to do, but it's characterized by their actions and behavior. Also can be defined by their usage level, purchasing pattern, or loyalty. And then the last one, which is the more complicated one, but the best method to do psychographics, to do segmentation, is characterized by their motivations, personality, values, attitudes, interests, and or lifestyle. So obviously these are all different methods. And I would say, the top one is the easiest to do. The bottom one is the more complicated ones to do. Just give you an example, right? Most startups can afford to do a psychographic study, but the last segmentation exercise I did at Medtronic, the company gave me $600,000 to complete the segmentation work, right? So we spent 4 months, interviewed 500 physicians, and then did a great segmentation exercise, but $600,000, I'm not sure most startups can afford to spend that much time and money, but it's the best one because it actually tells you what motivates people and how they make decisions, right? So that's really what you're trying to do from segmentation is, who are these people and how do I actually talk to them, motivate them, or change their behavior on consumption of technologies.
There's a question, Henry.
Yes.
Aren't these product dependent segments and does not fit all? Like the question is in the chat, mostly geographic and demographic.
Okay, not sure what the question is. So there's a question related to, can there be segmentation done by product?
Shami, is it your question? Yeah, Shami, do you want to elaborate?
So what I'm trying to say here is like the market segmentation based on geographic and demographic. Is it not like a product based? Like if let's say in my case, my example, let's say we're targeting we're making a new drug. How will and that drug is not subjective to age or people living in a particular area. Will geographic and demographic still be a market segment type?
So great question. So the segmentation is based on the customers, not the product, right? And then you have to ask, so as you're defining your segmentation methodology, you have to ask a question, would people in Winnipeg behave differently than people in Brandon, right? So that's what you're trying to go after in your segmentation methodology. I would say, because I know your technology, I don't believe people in Brandon, Montreal, or Toronto would behave differently in the adoption of a new therapy. Right?
Yeah.
So as you're defining your segmentation, you have to ask that question. There's a few tests. Would people behave differently? And then 1, 2, can a person belong in multiple segments? And if you fail those 2 tests, your methodology fails, right? So I would say, take me. I'm in DC right now. I grew up in Montreal. I live in Minnesota, and I now reside in Winnipeg. My location does not dictate how it would behave or respond to a new therapy, right? So as you do the segmentation, you have to think it's about the customer and would they behave differently? And then could one person belong in multiple segments? Now, granted geography, I live in Winnipeg, so I wouldn't belong in the Brandon segment, but that's the question you have to ask as you're doing the segmentation. Does that methodology change the way people behave?
And I think, Henry, to add on to that, if you're looking at something that's like, I don't know, snowmobiles, in that, then you have a totally different situation, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, makes sense.
Because obviously people in Phoenix would not respond well to snowmobile.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Any question that's really important, right? So segmentation, you can't have customers that belong in multiple segments. If they could realistically belong in multiple segments, then your segmentation methodology is flawed. Okay, makes sense. And it's also customer segment, not product. A product can belong in multiple segments. Some products can fit into a specific segment, but as you do segmentation, as you're segmenting the customers, not your product. I guess we did little example. Oh yeah, exercise. Sorry about that. The exercise, I skipped that exercise. All right. So that'll be the first exercise. So for this exercise, we're doing an X-ray based machine to test the level of bone loss in seniors. So the product, so that part is important. The product is to be installed in imaging systems at hospitals or imaging centers, and for use or standalone for use in physician's office. So there's two uses for that product. It could be in hospitals or it could be in physician's offices. So in teams, take 5 minutes, discuss the following. What customer segmentation hypotheses you would use, and then identify 3 segments. Okay, so take 5 minutes, go through the exercise, because I wanted everybody to do a common exercise that we can all share, because if you guys do your product, it makes it a little complicated, but now you're all starting from the same place of knowledge. X-ray-based machine, it could be installed in hospitals or in imaging centers, or in the offices of the physicians. And then your exercise is to come up with what hypotheses you would use to segment, and then identify 3 segments.
Okay, we'll open up the breakout rooms. Just with the number of participants, we'll have groups of.
How was that little exercise? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Let's see. I will pick on some people. Thumbs up. All right, let's see.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Take room 1. How about you share what type of segmentation you've gone with, and then what 3 segments you've identified.
Who's the room 1?
Oh, you guys don't remember? All right, I'll have to pick a person then. You don't remember. All right, let's see. Let's pick on Pavan. What about you? What did your team come up with as hypothesis and segments? Gavin, can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we came up with we said that a couple of the factors that we might want to segment based on would be geography, for example, based on how close they are to senior homes or other places where there are lots of seniors. That seems wildly unspecific. And then I guess demographic is also a big factor. Obviously, if this machine is targeting seniors, then you're more likely to want I guess like to treat like hospitals or centers where there's a higher concentration of seniors, so that would also affect maybe your. I guess these both sound like geography though, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we kind of. Sorry.
No, let's pick on somebody else just to see. Let's see. Uchenna, how about you group? What did you guys come up with?
I think it was more or less the same thing. We considered geographical location, and then demography, because again, it also depends on for geographical location, how much, the number of seniors you have in a particular location would also matter. And then customer segment, well, it's like hospitals, we consider the hospital management, who are more or less decision makers, and then gerontologists who also use these machines. So these are more or less like 2 key customers that we considered, and then of course geographical location, and then demography.
Okay, let's pick on one person. How about you, Javad? What did your team discuss?
Yeah, so in our room, so we were room 3.
Okay.
So we discussed that some of the customer segments could be hospitals, diagnostic centers, physicians' offices, and also researchers in different institutes and universities who actually, study different patients who are undergoing bone loss. In some of the hypotheses that we came up for this kind of an instrument is that this instrument is going to be more accurate, more precise, less time consuming, with less side effects for patients, and of course, cost effective as well, because they usually turn out to be pretty expensive. And yeah, that's basically what we discussed in our rooms.
Excellent. No, that's great. Okay, so this little exercise, there was a very important cue to help you in the segmentation, right? So it says the product to be installed at hospitals or in physicians' offices. So with that said, who is the customer of this product? Anyone? Who's the customer of this product? Any hands raised? Anyone?
Doctors, hospitals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doctors, hospitals.
That's correct, right? So the patients, granted in my line of business, patients are rarely impactful in decision-making and product consumption, right? So the customer for this product are hospitals and physicians' offices, right? So the seniors are not my customer, right? So it's important that you understand who the customer is, what they're going to do with the product, but the decision-making to purchase, unfortunately, the patient is not necessarily involved. So we do hope in the future things will change, but right now we tend to do what the physician tells us to do, right? So it's really important to identify who the customer is and then how you segment those customers. So the last group, I think, was group 3 hypothesis was correct. And then there's many ways to segment, right? So you could say, I would do it by large academic institution, and I could do it imaging, remote imaging centers. So that's a segmentation you could do, right? So you can think about what they are, what they do, where they are is a possibility, but just think more critically, how do I break down all those customers, which I know there's about 1,000 imaging centers in Canada. So how do you break down those customers, right? So you really need to think first and foremost, who is that customer? And then how do I break them down into manageable chunks when I think about it, right? Because as we know, HSC would behave very differently compared to, the imaging center on Pembina and, near the perimeter, right? So those are two different set of customers. Their beliefs, their funding structure, very different. They do the same thing, but they do it differently, okay? So a little exercise. So think very critically who the customer is before you actually segment. Because for this example, patients are not the customer of this product. They're users, but they're not customers. All right. Let's fly over quickly. Technology adoption. So I do know, obviously doing marketing, I do know who is going to be a innovator and who's going to be a laggard. So quick question, I can tell what type of person you are based on how much crypto do you have? And full disclosure, I have too much. Anybody has too much crypto or maybe in a crypto addiction? Anyone wants to share? All right, you guys don't want to share it. That's fine. I am addicted to crypto.
I have way too much crypto too, Henry.
Too much, I know. All right. Let me close that screen. All right. So technology adoption, right? So we'll talk about the study that defined how people adopt, how to segment people within their likelihood to adopt new technologies. And it's really the science about, most customers don't want to try new things in general, right? So keyword most. People tend to prefer to buy from market leaders, right? So that's why Apple, Samsung continues to dominate. You can sub-segment people based on their level of risk aversion, right? So some people are risk taker by nature, some people don't. Some people just stick to tried and true. And then within that technology adoption, what they call technology adoption curve, there's really 5 most segments: innovators, right? So people who just will consume new things and they don't need to be convinced. They want to be part of the technology creation. Then you have the early adopters, pretty easy to define. Then you have the early majority. We'll talk about what is early majority. And lastly, late majority. And then, of course, the laggards, people who just will not adopt. So the curve, right? So can be split into 2, the early market, then the mainstream market. And there's a key inflection point that we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's called the chasm, right? So what you're trying to do as a company is you're trying to break through the chasm, right? Because we do know a lot of new technologies are stuck with innovators and early adopters, and then it never gets to the early majority. Therefore, they never realize the revenue potential that the company has aspired to. So those are the 5 segments within technology adoption curve. So I know I keep mentioning segment, So just want to pause for a second. So as you define your market and you segment, right? So they can say, let's pick geography because it's easy. Let's say Winnipeg, Brandon, and Selkirk. Those are my customer segments. But within each of those segments, there's those 5 technology adoption segment, right? So you can further sub-segment, right? So you have a high-level segment, and then within that segment, you have those 5 technology adoption segments, right? So I know it's get a little complex, but if you live in Winnipeg, you can be a laggard living in Winnipeg. If you live in Brandon, your different customer segment, you can be a emerging. One person can be a little majority, right? So you serve those 5 technology adoption segments within each customer segments that you've identified. Oh, the first one, you're innovators, right? So you're innovators, they're tech enthusiasts, they're easy to find. The way to find a tech enthusiast is pretty easy. You say, hey, I'm working on this cool technology. You want to go along on a journey? And if they say absolutely, there's your innovator, right? So they just are looking for new technologies to participate in. They actually are easy to identify because they will just jump in and want to help, want to be part of the solution, are willing to accept incomplete solutions, right? So the innovators don't want to wait for a complete product. They just want to be part of it, right? That's your early innovator. That's your innovator. Early adopters, they're not necessarily technologists, right? So they're not necessarily the ones working with the entrepreneurs or trying to build a product. But keyword is they have the insight to match the emerging tech to a strategic opportunity, right? So they're very quick to identify how can I use the technology into what I do, right? And key thing not on the slide is they self-adopt, right? So an early adopter does not need to be convinced to adopt. They'll see it themselves. They say, this thing is pretty cool. I can use it here. They adopt, right? So they don't need to be convinced to adopt. So that's a key difference between your early market and your mainstream market. These two, first one, they'll participate. Early adopters will self-adopt. Then next one is early majority. Your early majority, obviously, that's 34% of your market, right? For them, they need to be convinced. How can they be convinced? You provide them a key ROI, you provide them a key gain or a key pain reliever of your solution, and they need to see early adopters part of it, right? So early majority needs to be convinced. Some of them can be convinced with data or evidence. Some of them can be convinced by the early adopters, right? So give an example. In my business, obviously everything I do, we do with physicians. So I always have a clinician advisory board on the team. Why? Because physicians want to listen to other physicians, not to the idiot marketer like me. So the early adopters convince the early majority, and then they adopt, right? So the early majority needs to be convinced how differs within each of those individuals, but a lot of times they want to see that somebody else is adopted, right? So they don't want to be first. They say, oh, there's a bunch of people using it. Okay, now I can adopt. So that's really the early majority, right? So the key word, right? Pragmatist. There has to be a reason. There has to be value for this product. There has to be others that justify its use. So those are your pragmatists. Then the late majority, the conservatives, right? So they're not comfortable with that technology. They're not sure, or they may have a tried and true products or a solution that they're already using. So they're just on a sideline waiting, right? So they're waiting to see, is that going to be established standard, right? So this would be the non-Henry and Dimitri for crypto. They're looking at it. Seems interesting, but they just think it's still speculation and it's not real, right? So that would be a late majority. They need to be convinced. They need to see the full evidence, and they may have something tried and true that they're just sitting on the sideline. Lastly, the skeptics, laggards. They'll either block the purchasing of that new technology, or they just might never adopt it at all, right? They might never jump in. They'll know about it, not interested, right? So that's your laggards, right? Between 5 segments: innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. So let me go back to it quickly. One thing to know, right? So as you're building your market and then you're trying to capture customers, a lot of companies spend a lot of time convincing these people. But as a marketer, I would like for you to consider people on the left, right? So they make up 50% of your market. So why spend energy on late majority and laggards when these ones self-adopt, that's 16% of your market, and these people need to be convinced, and hopefully you have data and evidence to support your hypotheses, and then you have some early adopters, right? So these 3 segments are 50% of your market. So you should probably spend your time and energy here instead of trying to convince laggards, right? So it's something to think about, right? So as you start to know your customers, you'll actually be able to know who they are, and then it can actually help you make a decision. Do you want to spend time with a laggard when the early adopters and early majority will make up 50% of your market, and they therefore will convince late majority to adopt? Okay, something to think about. Don't spend time with laggards, spend time with early adopters and early majority. Okay, is that clear enough? I know it's a new concept for some. So is it clear enough about those adoption, what motivates them, and how those people adopt? Okay, all right. So as I mentioned, right, innovators help educate early adopters. Early adopters, when they're satisfied, they provide reference to the pragmatists, right? As I mentioned before, the early majority want to be convinced and want to see some people using it. So the early adopters can be your reference. And then your early majority provide the bulk of the revenue, the market leadership, and the product becomes reliable, cheaper, provide you the key evidence and proof points of the utility of your product, and that convinces your late majority, right? So you can see the nice sequence: innovators influence early adopters. Early adopters provide a reference for early majority. Early majority provide the proof, evidence, and data to support adoption by late majority.
Henry, we just have a question. So what are the key signs of early adopter companies and firms?
Okay, so good question. So the segment is, once again, customers, right? So not the company. And so trying to find an example of, some technology that have not gone beyond early adopters. That's the reason I chose crypto. Crypto is still stuck mostly into innovators and early adopters. The early majority have not completely jumped in yet, right? So you can all tell those people, this crypto addicted person who talks about crypto all the time, and then nobody seems interested. So the technology adoption is of customers, not the company. And then you can identify, is it technology? Has it crossed the chasm? Since now we're talking on that topic, has it crossed the chasm where the early majority are not on board? So hopefully that answers your questions, right? So it's still customers, right? So today's main session is still primarily based on customers, not technology.
So what happens when your customer is a company for those B2B markets?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if your customer, if a company is a customer, then they're still going to behave as a customer, right? So same thing with hospital, right? So hospital is a business, but they are a customer because they consume technology and solutions, and then they behave similarly, right? So we do know Canadians, let's do it by geography now. So we do know Canadian healthcare system is far more conservative than the US healthcare customer system, right? So let's pick one, Mass General. Mass General is an innovative hospital. They are quick to adopt, they want to participate in the creation of the technology. And then take Brandon Hospital or whichever hospital in Winnipeg, they tend to be late majority, right? So it's the same behavior, right? So even if you're a company, your consumption and your behavior is similar to a individual, because at the end of the day, individuals make the decision and they're impacted by their culture, by their financing structure, by their political structure. So think the same way. Even if it's a company, it's a consumer, and then they'll behave similarly in their adoption patterns. Answer the question?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So as I mentioned, the chasm, right? So the chasm is when the technology.
Sorry, Henry, I just have a quick question. What is the mechanism that we can identify these segments of the customers, their early adopters or early majorities or something?
Yeah, good question. So it's about knowing your customer, right? So you can do some research and then you can actually do some testing, right? So you can do some research, you can do some testing, doing interviews, and there's also knowledge, right? So yes, I have 25 years in the healthcare industry, so I know that, but you can go online, right? So you can see, for example, how many MRI systems do we have in Manitoba, right? So in Minneapolis, where I lived, there was more MRI that I could walk to than all of the province of Manitoba. So that gives you some insights about, the system in Manitoba. So you can actually look to see how quickly have they adopted similar or previous technologies. That'll give an idea, right? So this is really about knowing that customer.
So that customer should be the decision maker.
Not necessarily, right? So decision maker is part of that customer, right? So
yes, but the specification of that customer that I'm interviewing should be decision maker. That I can say then they're early adopters or so, because I need to be actually sure that they will buy or they need our product.
So yeah, okay. So I think it's best done by an example, and then we'll let Dimitris. Let's take an example of a school or a hospital. So within that school, you will have, let's say, the principal, and the principal could be an innovator. Then you can get the vice principal, could be a late majority. Then you can have the CFO, who's a laggard. So within that institution, you'll have various segmentation within
exactly
the institution, but the institution as a whole is one person, right? So take another example that I know offhand, right? So Mass General Hospital, they are an innovator. I have dealt with cardiac surgeons who were laggards, but the overriding culture of the institution still took precedence over that individual. So yes, each individual can have different persona, but what you really need to be concerned about is the persona of that institution. So yes, you need to understand the person you're interviewing, but if I'm a laggard and a just a regular surgeon, my persona will not impact as much the overall persona that the company or the institution is trying to project. So you do need to know both, but what's the most important is what's the overriding persona of the institution, because that's what drives the decision making.
So it's difficult.
It is difficult. It's not easy. Absolutely correct. Because yes, you'll be dealing with different people within the institution that have different behaviors. And we'll talk about persona a little bit later. But still, the most important part is what is the overriding culture of the overall institution, which is obviously culture, right? So culture is amalgamation of all the individuals that gets to one culture. You have a comment, Dimitri?
These are great questions. Be aware that every one of us in this room now, the Zoom room, it has the same questions. And the reality is, you are starting off with guesses and hypotheses. And as you're talking to your customers that you feel are the most important, initially it's like, I feel this is the person I should talk to first. you have the conversation, but what we can't predict is what awareness you come to as you're talking to that person. You may ask them, who should I be talking to? Who is important in this decision-making process? And they may steer you in the direction of someone you didn't think of, or someone that you didn't realize had more influence than you actually thought they did. So it is, like we said, a very messy at the beginning, but you're wading through that muck, and eventually you come out of it. You come out of it smarter. You come out of it wiser, because you're talking to enough people who are sharing information with you. They are sometimes talking to each other, sometimes not. So sometimes you end up being the smarter person in the room after a while. It's about exploring. That's why it's called customer discovery. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So yeah, so Dimitri is right. So you make an hypothesis, and then sometimes you might be surprised, right? You make an assumption, and then it proves out to be wrong, which is great, which is what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to validate hypotheses, validate assumptions, and that gives you an idea, and then you learn, and then it gives you patterns sometimes to say what type of response, what type of behavior that get elicited, that gives you a knowledge to say, okay, that person is a early adopter, right? So if you have an interview with an individual and they say, oh, that's very interesting, how can I help? That tells you that person's an innovator. Or if that person says, yeah, I'm not sure, it seems a little not refined. Okay, now you've categorized it, right? So yes, you're making assumptions, but during your customer discovery and asking questions, you're being informed, and you can validate your hypotheses, and then you can actually get more information. You can tell by the way they respond, right? So my crypto example was funny, but it's real. You can tell there's some cues that people give you that actually exposes who they really are.
And Henry, the other thing is, like, I looked at, originally I thought I was an early adopter with crypto, but really when I think about it, I won't invest more than 10% of my portfolio in crypto, and less now that things are troublesome in the stock market. So I'm an early adopter. So if you find yourself in an interview with an early adopter, with the early majority, or somebody who's in the late majority, or somebody who's a laggard, then shift your questions. You want to find out why they're thinking that way. That's good information to have, right? Because then it changes the way that you're going to speak to your early enthusiasts as well. You're going to ask different questions to get to, okay, what motivates and drives people to make the decision? And so how do I get to that type of a pitch or that type of speak when I'm talking to people in the boardroom?
Yep. No, thanks, Dimitri. All right. Now go ahead.
So my question is, how do you know from the conversations that you're having whether they could potentially become early majority or the adopters, like Dimitri said? So in my interviews, they're like, so I have gotten some responses such as, like, I have not looked at this right now, and I go on to ask, oh, why is that? To have further information why they haven't pursued certain, for instance, in my case, like if they haven't tried any healthy drinks on the market, I go on to say why. And then they tell me the reason, and they're like, if I had this, I would I would try the drinks. Like if I had more information about, if I had a scientific evidence to support the claims they're making, I would buy a drink. But then that brings me to the question, do they actually follow up? If they say I would do this, do we consider them to become a different category than they are, or that's too early to tell?
Actually, it's a brilliant question you asked, and because we're running out of time, I'll just give the answer. That person's the early majority. They just essentially told you, if you convince me, I'll adopt, right? The late majority would have said, yeah, I don't know, I need to see more people using it. The early innovators goes, oh, when can I use it, right? So that cue is your classic early majority. It says, if you give me evidence, I'll do it. That's your classic definition of early majority. The late majority will say, I don't know, I'd like to see some people using it, and I'd like to talk to my brother who's used it, right? So there's some classic cues people, and when they answer that question, which is a brilliant question because you force them to say, what do you need to adopt?
Okay, thank you.
Good. Yeah, that's early majority. They say, convince me and I'll do it.
Great question for our mentors a little later. So Hannah, I'm going to call on you to ask it again, okay?
I got crossing the chasm. Yeah, so finding early adopters. So put a little finer point on the question you actually asked. Characteristics you can identify during your interviews. Yeah, they have a massive business problem, right? So if they're motivated, right, they're early adopters, right? So they have lots of pain or they have lots to gain. That gives you an early adopter situation. If they're aware that they have the problem, if they've searched for a solution, right? So just like you mentioned, Hannah, if they have not searched for it, they're not necessarily an early adopter because they're not really looking to solve something or to gain something. They may have created their own fixer-upper solution, or they have access to budget to purchase a solution, right? So these are the type of cues that tells you if they're early adopters. And then there's your answer right here, Anna, right? You have searched for a solution. If they've not searched for it, they're probably not highly motivated to solve for it. All right, any questions? Anything at all that's super, super important? All right, go to personas. Oh, you know, when I used to be working for VP marketing and say, so what customer persona you should seek? And I'm like, man, I just want the winner. I just want the guy to make the decisions. But that's my preferred persona. I want the winner. So we talked about segmentation. So I just want to skip over that, get to persona very quickly. Yes, you need to talk to a lot of people. That's why we're asking you guys to do 100 plus, right? So the key number is 100 plus interviews. Customer segmentation. So I know we talked about that. You never really understand a person until you consider from this point of view, until they get in their shoes, climb into the skin, and walk around. Well, I guess there's a typo. It says customer personal instead of customer persona. So we talked about identifying a market, conducting a segmentation, and then obviously you're going from a no-name market, doing segmentation, and you name your segments. And like I said before, tends to be 5 segments, and then the segments are really not individuals, right? So they're a fictional, no-name, no human-based segment. And then the next step you want to do is you want to create persona. So now it actually create an individual, a person, into that segment that can actually represent what your segment is, right? So what is a customer persona? Fictional representation of an actual customer or stakeholder. It generalizes their needs and behavior. It's based on your customer discovery and interviews. And you identify one persona ideally for each customer segment. And you can also include a negative persona, right? So that's what the exercise is. Market, segment, persona. So some of the information that may be included: day in the life, role of responsibility, how they experienced the problem, how they solved, how they wished it could be, where they look for solutions, how they make decisions, related preferences and tastes, and of course, at the end, demographics. So that's kind of how you can define your customer personas. An example, background, right? So job, career, path, family. An example, if you couldn't create persona, could we name Sally? She's the head of human resources. She worked at the same company for 10 years, worked her way up from an HR associate, is married, has 2 children. Demographics, female, 30 to 45, dual family income, $140,000, and live in a suburban area. And lastly, some behavior type identifiers. She has a calm demeanor, probably has an assistant that screens her calls, asks to receive personal mailed printed material, right? So that's an example of a persona, right? So you want to create a fictional person that is an actual person, right? It's an actual human with a name, and then you define that person, background, demographics, identifiers. Another example, we'll just skip it over because we're running out of time. So same thing, right? So another one, that's continuation. Goals, keeps employees happy, blah, blah, blah. Challenges, getting everything done with a small staff. And what can we do about Sally specifically? we may want to make it easy for it to manage the employee data in one place, integrate legal and finance team systems. So that's one example of a persona. So exercise 2, for this exercise, same teams for 5 minutes. I want you guys to develop a persona for your ideal customer. And then so I would say pick one company. So there's going to be 4 or 5 of you. So pick one company and pick a segment. It's important to identify a segment and then develop that persona for the ideal customer. So let's just do 5 minutes, Amanda. We don't need to do 10, let's just do 5.
Sounds good. So it'll shuffle the ELs just into different pairings. So I'll open the room for 5 minutes here.
Hopefully that was not rather an exercise, so I'm interested to see what people have. Let's see. Hey, from room 3, how about you share your persona that you guys created? Take.
Oh, is it me? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So we were thinking of iPhone 15 Pro products like Apple. We said a company Apple, and like yesterday since the new phone release, so we thought about iPhone 15 Pro be a good example. And there was many different persona we thought about. One is a tech YouTuber, no, tech reviewer, and also I can say YouTuber, and another one was what was that?
You have a name for that tech YouTuber?
Tech
Sorry?
reviewers.
Yeah, and what was the other one, sir? Lucas?
Well,
I forgot. And
yeah, we mentioned the early adopters will be mostly the people who are interested in latest technology. So those are some of the people on YouTube. Like most of the people will be dependent on them for the initial reviews of the new product. So the company will probably target them first. So when they review, and then they can market them or promote their products. So that was one of the main customer segment in our case.
Okay. Did you get to create a persona for that segment?
Yeah, like a person who has a YouTube channel and who has a lot of subscribers and who regularly updates it with new videos, some type of like that.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, just make sure you give it a name, right? So make it really make it a person, right? So that person has a name, an actual job title, where they live, what are the motivation, pains and gains, right? So make sure you have that included. So let's see, somebody in room 5. Somebody wants to volunteer for room 5 to share the persona they created?
Are we room 5?
So that was Hannah, Kai, Nassim, or Shabab was in room 5.
Oh, right. So Henry, we decided to go with Hannah's product. She's developing a drink for healthy gut. Do you want to talk about it, Hannah, or do you want me to go over it?
Oh, you could go over it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we basically identified John. John is a hardworking industrial worker who's working 80 hours a week. So he barely has any time for, cooking or, spending any time for making meals and stuff. He is 30 years of age. He is a healthy individual overall, but he has some gut issues. So he's looking for some remedies and solutions for that. He's also living in Canada. So Hannah's product would be, ideal for him since he's been looking for some, drinks or medicines or drugs that can improve his gut health. We can advertise this product to him in the right way so that it's cost effective and it's also, it works for him as well. So yeah, that's what we discussed.
Very good. No, that's excellent. That is fantastic. So yes, right. So you want to do your persona is an actual person, right? So a person with likes, dislikes, has a role, what conditions. So the fact that you've identified that, works 80 hours a week clearly makes him a stronger candidate for something that can remedy that. No, good job. All right. Just keep moving along here. I can get my, okay. Okay, let's go to stakeholders. Go through that very quickly because I want to get to my favorite topic, market sizing. So we'll go through stakeholders very quickly. The slides will be available shortly later this afternoon that people can access to. But, as I mentioned before, especially if you're selling to an organization, there are different stakeholders involved in the buying process, right? So even if you do a home construction, there are going to be more than one person likely to be involved in the buying process. So you need to know what role each person plays into the decision process. So for this example, we're just going to go very, very quickly, right? Scissors. So surgical scissors, right? So not just a regular scissors, but a surgical scissors. So one can say, what makes this a surgical scissor? I would say it costs 100 times the price of a regular scissor. That's really what we sell them for. For this example, even though in the example I have a scalpel, not a scissor, but that doesn't matter. So the beneficiary is a stakeholder. So that's a person that has a role in the decision process. So who stands to benefit for the use of this product? The end user. So who's likely going to actually use the product, right? So the end user may not always be a beneficiary, right? So a pacemaker, the end user is a doctor, yet the patient is a beneficiary. So end user, beneficiary may not be the same person. The decision maker, for example, in our organization, they have a purchasing committee, right? Or the CFO could be the decision maker. So decision maker, end user, and beneficiary, 3 different roles, may not be the same person. Buyers, right? So we do know in large organization, there's somebody who actually buys the products and then others get to use it, right? So we see that in hospitals, right? So drapes, gowns, right? So the end user, i.e. the patient, right? You guys all know when you try those gowns, not really comfortable. So somebody else bought them, most likely the cheaper one. But yeah, nurses, doctors, and patients don't really get involved in the buying decision on some products. And lastly, the influencer. So who actually has a decision or an impact in what gets purchased, right? So we talked about multiple roles or stakeholders in the buying process: end user, beneficiary, buyer, decision maker, influencer, and lastly, counselor, right? So who gets to advise, to make recommendations, to inform the various stakeholders as part of the decision-making process. Any question on that? Just wanted to go it very, very quickly. More, hopefully they don't exist in the organization you're trying to sell for, right? So who is doing everything they can to stop the purchase? So you need to know who they are. You need to know their role they play in the decision making, and you need to have strategies for each of those individuals, right? So ignoring the saboteur essentially guarantees you not getting a sale. So you need to get them on board or to minimize their impact in the negative part of the decision-making process. Lastly, your champion, right? So champion is key in selling to an organization because that person will go and do the selling for you, right? So in what I do, I always have a champion. And it's usually the chief of surgery, and then they help convince the rest of the organization to push this through, right? So saboteur, just as important as a champion, because you need to have a strategy. And sometimes if you have a champion who happens to be the CEO, it makes the decision easier. But each one of those roles in the decision-making process of a purchasing decision, you need to have a strategy to work with them to make sure that they support the decision. And then you want to be outflank the saboteur and really promote the right champion to help you through the organization. skip the exercise because I want to get to my favorite section. So any question on stakeholders and our roles people play in the decision-making process? Okay, clear enough. All right. To my favorite section. I have to start with that because you'd be amazed how many times people have told me the market size of my product is $1 billion. Everybody wants this $1 billion market size. And, you know, it just seems to be, if it's not 1 billion, it's not worth doing. And I'll be the first one to tell you that is not true. A $500 million market or $100 million market is a great market if you can actually have a great value proposition. So we don't all need $1 billion market to make it worthwhile. So yes, I don't have enough fingers and toes to say how many times somebody has told me that the market is $1 billion. So market size. There's many ways to talk about market size, right? So we'll talk about some generalities of common language, especially in the entrepreneurial world, that people talk about the market size, right? So the first term is what they call the total addressable market, or the TAM, right? So it's a very familiar terms. And as you can see from those circles, it's a larger one, right? So the total addressable market, if you ignore the words on the side, is the constellation of all the people that could ever benefit from using a product, right? So if you're going to say, let's take an easy one, baby cereal, then your total addressable market will be all the babies under 2 years old in the world, right? So that could be a total addressable market. So all the potential people that could stand to benefit from your product is total addressable market. And then obviously you have to define it for yourself, right? So you have to define your market, and then you define what's my total addressable would be all babies under two, and then you can actually find information that says how many babies under 2 in the world, right? So you need to find a way to define it and look for data point to validate your assumption. Next one, I know it's going to talk about sales addressable. So it's actually called SAM, S-A-M. Some people call it serviceable, some people call it sales, whatever you want to call it. So I would say call it SAM. So now it's really real world, right? So now you've gone into, can that product or technology of yours really be appealing or interesting to them, right? So let's take the baby formula, for example. Total addressable will be all babies. And then your SAM could then be all babies in the Western world, right? Because we do know that the consumption pattern of baby cereal or is different per geography, right? So if you're doing a cereal, then your serviceable addressable market would be constrained based on either distribution, location, or or cultural aspect of consuming baby cereal. So that would be your SAM. TAM is all the people that could ever benefit from the product, right? So obviously TAM, any baby could benefit from a cereal, but we do know some cultures may not, readily accept cereal to feed their babies. And then the last one, we're going to call it target market for this exercise. So then now it's really based on, priority, early adopters maybe, or people that are most desirable, or even constrained by your ability to actually capture them, right? So if you want to talk about baby cereal, and I'm mostly a Canada-based organization, then obviously my target market would be Canada instead of global or all the potential babies, right? So TAM, SAM, SOM is really talk about the market. And then when you give a number, this is what my little irk was. When somebody says 1 billion, what do you actually mean, right? Because I've seen a lot of companies that I've done assessment for them, yes, the total addressable market was 1 billion, but when I completed the analysis, the actually target market was like $50 million. And it's very likely, because we tend to show the bigger number, but it's not a real number, right? So total addressable market is a fantasy, a dream, and technically I ignore it. And I'm much more interested myself in the target market, which is really what are you likely to capture? Because the total addressable market, we're not going to sell cereal in Afghanistan. Not going to happen. So, yes, Dimitri.
So is it babies who are TAM, or is it their parents, or is it somebody else that influences that kind of decision or the buying power?
So that's a great question. So in this example, I, as a marketer, would define the babies, because obviously if for some crazy reason, every family had 10 children, then the size of the market is significantly impacted by the amount of babies they have compared to the number of parents. So that's why, I mean, you have to define it clearly. What is that market, right? Saying 1 billion means nothing. Saying 1 billion because there's, I don't know, 1 billion babies in the world, now it actually means something. So to me, for this example, the babies consume the product. Therefore, the amount of product I can sell is dependent on babies. Right? So it's all about the definition, not the number. It's about the definition of what you're defining is your total addressable vis-a-vis target market. Right? So, like I said, right? So if I go back to that, those are scars that I've had in my career. I'm given it's 1 billion. I do the analysis. I'm like, oh my God, you're not going to make any money in this market. Right? So 1 billion, the number does not mean anything if you don't define it. And in this example, I've decided it is defined by the number of babies. If you're selling air conditioning unit, then it's defined by the number of household. If you're saying pants, it's defined by the number of people that wear pants, right? So it all depends on how you define that market and then what key variable that impacts the number. Super, super important, right? So you have to define your market and you have to be clear to people when you give a number, how you defined it and what is it? Is it a total addressable or is it my target market? Like I said, I have done it where I was told it was $5 billion. And then when I completed the work with my team, we said it was 125. It just said that the CEO was not very happy. So have to be clear. Any question on that? We'll do a little exercise just to practice. So of course, people are going to ask, well, how the heck do you do that, Henry? How do you size your market? I should have put an example. I forgot to put an example in this case. So the easiest way to define your market, you go online, you search, and then you see reports, right? There are reports for every single market, right? So if I go online and say, what's the market size for pacemakers? I'll have at least 50 different reports that size the market. So that's your, I would say, your top-down and lazy approach, but use whatever information you can find to size your market. Now, not all markets are researched heavily as, you know, airplanes, flights, food. But if your market is being researched and followed in every report, use that because that gives you a reference point. Now you're actually more trusted, right? So if I say it's $1 billion, you're like, well, based on what? They say, well, there's a report that said my market is going to grow 15% CAGR and reach $25 billion in 2030, right? So those are super, super easy. So do some research, top down, you have some reports. You can do the bottom-up approach, which tends to be a little harder, but you can actually say, if my product is intended to be consumed by individuals, then you can say, then how many individuals are there? So that gives you a number. And then you multiply by how much they're going to consume, and then what's the price, right? So if I follow example, I think it's Hannah's example of a drink. If your market is identified by unhealthy individuals, and you don't have to follow that example, that's my decision to size my market. If my market is unhealthy individuals who don't have time to cook, then I say there are 5 million of those people in Canada, and then they're going to consume 1 drink per day. So then it's like 365 drinks, and a drink costs $5. So there's 5 million times 365 times $5. There's your market size. Okay, so that's your bottom-up approach where you build all the criteria, all the factors to arrive at a number. Top down, do some research, there are some reports, and then you say, how much of that market is relevant to me? And then you can do it this way, right? So two approach. I would say as an entrepreneur in a startup, don't go spending months sizing the market, right? So I just did it for you, Anna. You can use mine and say, hey, there's a market size, and people will believe that, right? So the key to the market size is, did you do your research and do you have something that sounds reasonable, especially if you go in front of investors, because you want to be trusted, right? If you just say it's 1 million and say, how'd you come up with 1 million and you can't answer, then you don't look like you've done your homework, right? So plain example, I'd say, take another example. The X-ray product that we did early on, 5,700 hospitals in the US. Every one of them should have at least one, and the product cost $5,000. 5,000 hospitals, $5,000 product, there's my market size, okay? Any question on that? I'm not going pretty quickly, but I think it's best done through an exercise instead of, digging deeper. But the key part is, right, so I'm going back to the beginning again. Define your market, identify your segment, create some persona, and then define your market size based on your market, right? So another example that's super important. If my market is hospital, in the US, there's 5,700. But if I define my market as physicians' offices, there's 300,000, right? So you see how quickly one product market size vastly changed. So you have to define your market first. Market size obviously implies market. If you don't have a definition of your market, you can't really size it, but you have to define it and write it down. Okay? Any question on that? All right. So talk about top-down approach, begin a broad statistic from a secondary source, right? So do some research, millions of reports available, use some stats, data points, make assumptions, but more importantly, write them down. Because if you have those assumptions, they're technically hypotheses, validate them, right? So too many people put a market size with some assumptions, nobody knows those assumptions, and then they invalidate those assumptions and don't change the market size. Bottom up, roll it up, right? So identify sales data or, stats, general stats, right? So we do know how many Canadians there are. We do know how many Americans there are. So you can find some numbers and then factor all those in to get your market size. Any question before we do the exercise? No question? That was clear enough? My favorite topic within 10 minutes? Wow.
I have a question, Henry. Tying this back into your list of, percentage of who's going to be an early adopter all the way down to laggards, have you applied that percentage to your market sizing to say how many of which to expect in your market size?
So, no, I have not. So that topic comes up a little later. So what I do, I size the market per segment, right? So I do it per segment. And then I apply the technology adoption curve on the revenue, right? So let's say segment 1 is, let's say 1,000 individuals. And then I expect in my year 1, I will get 20% of those people. And year 5, which is assuming maturity, I will have 50% of those individuals. And then in year 7, I'll have 84%. So I usually put the technology adoption curve as part of my revenue capture, not the size, because a laggard still belongs in that segment size. Now you may never reach that person, but they belong and it's part of that market. That makes sense?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I, as I understood that segmentation, we need to do segmentation, customer segmentation, in order to reduce our target market. Maybe like this, we have a clearer objectives. What if there's two customer segmentations that are very directly related? Let's say, for example, the example you point out, hospitals, physicians, small different segmentations. What if they're very related? Could we sum both segmentation to increase our, let's say, market size, because it will increase our market size that way, and that way, because I assume that it's much more desirable to have a bigger size market, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So in this example, right? So those will be two segments, right? Because yes, that product, ideally, right? So that's the project I'm working on. I would want to see it in the physician's office and in the hospital, right? So then you would say my segment could be healthcare institution, and the segments could be physician's office and hospitals and imaging centers. And then I roll all of them to a market size. So yes, you're correct. It depends on what your market is, right? So for this product, my market is healthcare institution, healthcare, well, I call it, it's actually called HCP, right? So healthcare, providers, healthcare providers include hospitals and physicians. So once again, it's the definition. I could design a product to be only for hospital, then therefore that would exclude physician's office. But for this example we had, it was for both. So the market would be healthcare providers, and the segments would be physician's office, hospitals, imaging centers. Any other question? Wow, my favorite topic in 15 minutes and only one question. I will pat myself in the back.
No, there's another one here.
All right.
In that case, unless my product is totally new, does market segment still divide into various categories like influencers, champions, and so on?
So yeah, so that question is like 3 questions. So if it's a new product, you still have a market, because who do you intend to sell this into? Who is supposed to use this product? How is this product supposed to be used? So that's still, you could create a new market, that's completely realistic, but you still need a market, which is essentially where all the players are. And then I like to define, let's say, a market, let's say baseball players. Well, my market is baseball fields, because guess what? That's where they all are, right? So even if you create a product or you can create a new market, it still needs to be defined what your market is. So that's one. And then you can still segment, right? To say, take baseball, for example. I hate baseball, but it's a good example. In that market, there's a catcher, there's a pitcher, there's outfield, and there's infield. That's your segment, because they wear different gear and they do different things. And then within that, you can say some will be likely to pitch right, pitch left, right? So there's further segmentation. So you still define your market, segment that market, and then if your market is based on organization or businesses, then you have different roles people play within that company. So that's how you get into after the 3 things, right? So I know your question was indirect, but it did require to define the top 3 things to get into roles people play in the decision making. I hope I answered that question. I know I didn't answer it directly, but I think I answered what you intended. Any other questions, guys? Anything at all? That's super important, because it's going to be in your Scrum for next week. Talk about your market size.
Henry, I have a question. So let's say I'm developing a product which is kind of relying on another product which was built before. So let's say I'm developing a software which gets its data from another software in which most construction companies use it. So I have to build some kind of integration between those. Can I use the market assessment of that product, for example, to estimate my own market size?
Yeah, good question. So yes, you can use market information from that software to give you insights into your market. Their market size is not your market size. And the best way to answer that is that the market size for airliners is not the same market size for, let's say, seats of airliners, right? So they're not the same market, but yes, you can use information about that, right? So if I do, let's say, if I do landing gear, clearly my market is influenced by how many planes are actually built. So I use that information to define my market size, but the airline industry's market is not my market if I do landing gear. Is that a good example?
Yeah, got it.
Perfect. Yes, Dimitri, you had your hand raised.
So I know that as academics, we want to get the right answer here. And the reality here is when we talk about assumptions, we're still talking about guesses. And what we're saying is you identify your assumptions, you include that in your explanation for why you market size the way you did. And then early in the game, all of us understand that we're accepting those assumptions based on where you are in this conversation. As you talk to more and more of your interviewees, those assumptions become either validated or invalidated, iterated, tweaked, changed, rewritten, whatever it is that you have to do to get closer to, okay, I'm de-risking my guess. I'm de-risking my assumptions. And so don't look to be absolutely correct right up front. You're looking to provide some logic that comes from you at first, but then is informed by the people you talk to. So be okay with being wrong.
It's okay to change it. So it's not changing, you're refining. Right? So you start with 1 billion and you end up with 925 million. So it's not you were wrong, you're getting new information and you refine and you adapt. Okay. Any other questions? All right, that was clear enough, I'm assuming. So let's take 5 minutes and then we'll go for lunch. Pick one company from the teams and then describe very quickly. I know you don't have time to do some research, but you can still go on Google if you find a company that actually is being researched. Describe the SAM, TAM, and then target. Okay. So let's take 5 minutes, take them back to their groups again. Amanda, please, and then we'll reconvene.
Sounds good. I'll send you off.
I would just say, define your market, identify your segment. It's always the same process. I think I've done it hundreds of times in my career. Define your market, identify your segment, size your segments, and then back over again, validate, right? So we define your market, and then, like I said, we won't cover it this program, but after you define your market and you identify your target market, obviously it's size, and then it's the revenue. So I think it's been taken out, or it's class 7, I can't remember for sure, but the market is independent of your ability to actually capture it. The ability to capture it defines your revenue. So yes, investors are going to need that, but for today, we'd stop at sizing the market, right? So if you're fantastic and you're a leader, and my definition of a leader is typically 35% market share, or you can be terrible, have 1% market share, right? So today is define your market, identify a segment, size a segment, and define how you arrive at that number. So that's the exercise for today. Any questions on anything? Obviously, we'll have more time, and you can send me comments on Slack, email, LinkedIn, or talk with your facilitators. But it's extremely important that before you move to next week, you really understand your market, your segmentation, and the sizing, right? Because without that, every hypothesis you have will be flawed, right? So if you're confused, like I said, if you confuse, physician's offices versus hospital, it really messes up who you're going to try to talk to, and it really messes up how much revenue you're thinking you're going to capture. All right, any final thought before we let you guys for lunch? Oh, I think I had one more slide, Dimitri, I think. Just a second.
All right.
This one, yes, and that's it.
All right, so I'm going to finish off with this slide. Just some perspective. We're in week 1. I'm assuming that first 100 should have been around 75 to 100 during that 2-week period that we just spent. And we were looking for a perfect outcome of 10 or 15, somewhere in there. But that's perfection. We all know that perfection is not always possible. So that is the standard. If you've kind of gotten 3, 4, as many as 10, that's a great accomplishment for that 2-week period. More, even a better accomplishment. Outreach, outreach, outreach will get you there. So make sure you're constantly putting lots and lots of names into your CRM and reaching out. As you have lunch, please jot down some of these questions that you want to ask to the mentors. Come back with 2 or 3 questions in your back pocket, ready to go, and we should have a good session. 1 o'clock is when we come back. So go have about the better part of 35 minutes here for lunch, and we can see you back in about 35 minutes at 1 o'clock Central Time.
One. Amanda, do we have all of our mentors here? I saw Andrew, I saw Wendy.
And we have Mavis as well. So we have 3 so far.
Okay, so let's just give our mentors another minute or 2 to join. I think we have 3 more we're expecting. Is that correct?
Yes, around 3 more. So we have joining us now.
Yes, I think that is perfect. Okay. This may be just as we wait for our other 2 mentors to join us. Were there any more questions from this morning's session? Did anybody have anything like over lunch? Did you have a moment to maybe think about things and maybe have a follow-up question? No. Okay. That's because Henry, as he said, did such an amazing job of explaining everything that everybody's clear on what we're doing. So that's great. Okay, so quick reminder. So you have met some of these mentors back in our boot camp a couple of weeks ago. As part of the program, you do have to reach out to 2 mentors, book a 15-minute appointment. This is your opportunity to get some one-on-one time with somebody who is in this space and can give you some excellent guidance and advice. So please keep that in mind and make sure that you remember to do that. It is part of that ongoing checklist. And I think with that, maybe what we'll do is we will ask our mentors, maybe with the mentors, can you put your name and then put mentor beside you so I can see you and maybe others can see you as well? I see Mavis there. I see Andrew. That would just be super helpful so that our students can see who you are and where you are in this big group. And then as we do that, I will open up the floor to the mentors in just a second to do a bit of a 60-second introduction, who they are, what they do, how they can help and support and each of you in this program. So we have been this morning talking about customer segmentation, trying to determine, how to get to those people that are part of our sphere and our circle and do that market validation, customer validation piece. So we've been busy working on that this morning. So I know that everyone here is really excited to have an opportunity to ask each of our mentors some questions. So Mavis, may I start with you? 60 seconds, who you are, and tell us about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Mavis McCrae. I'm the director at the Prairie Research Kitchen at Red River College Polytechnic. I am a U of M grad and spent some time in the Center for Entrepreneurship as an entrepreneur in residence, career in agriculture, so food science and agriculture trained, and 25 years now in the industry. Looking forward to hearing what everybody has on tap.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mavis. Andrew, nice to see you again, by the way. So can I have you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm a tech transfer manager at the University of Manitoba in the Partnerships, Knowledge Mobilization, and Innovation office at the Smart Park. So I did my doctorate at the University of Western Ontario in nanotechnology and biotechnology. So I moved here 6 years ago to pursue additional research in the life sciences. I've previously been a colleague with Wendy at Futurepreneur, so I do have a little bit of business development background training. And my job really at the PKMI really is to provide tech transfer advice as well as sort of go-to-market strategies for new technologies that come out of the university, and as well as the Lab2Market program.
Thank you, Andrew. And I can just give Andrew a bit of a shout out. He came to speak to my entrepreneurship students last spring at U of W, and he was amazing. He's just a wealth of knowledge. So definitely tap into all of his experience and ask him some great questions this afternoon. And I also know Wendy. She's also taught with me over at U of W in the past. And so Wendy, welcome. And could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Rosalie. Yeah, very happy to see everyone today. I'm Wendy Yan. I'm the Business Development Manager for Futurepreneur, which is a national nonprofit organization to support young entrepreneurs by financing, mentoring, and free business resources. So part of my job is to guide entrepreneurs to start their business and review their business plan and the cash flow projection to help them from the beginning. And before my working at Futurepreneur, I finished my PhD at Asper School of Business at University of Manitoba, and I have been teaching marketing courses at U of M, U of W, and the River College before. So yeah, that was a fantastic experience working with the students. Well, I think that's it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Wendy. And Karine, I saw you somewhere. There you are. Could you introduce yourself as well?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Karin. I am the startup coach for the Stu Clark Center for Entrepreneurship, which, by the way, is located at the University of Manitoba within the Asper School of Business. We work with students across faculty that are interested to, launch their business ideas, commercialize, and become entrepreneurs. So myself, I have a background in accounting as well. I worked as a finance officer, financial analyst, and transitioned into entrepreneurship for 5 years now. I'm also an entrepreneur. Like, I worked on several projects, ready to launch my own startup pretty soon. So I'm very excited to be a mentor and be able to support you guys in your journey.
Oh, and Karine, I'm so happy to have a fellow CPA in the room, because I think sometimes in entrepreneurship we're not very well represented. So so nice to have you participate and be part of the team today. So I think that's all of the mentors that we have online for the moment. I hope I didn't miss anyone. So I think we're going to open it up to the students. You guys had some great questions this morning. Here's your opportunity to ask those questions to people who are working in this ecosystem, in this space each and every day. And so I'm going to open it up, and if nobody else has questions, I will start. So does anybody want to get going? Maybe raising a hand would be helpful, and then I can just facilitate making sure that questions are coming in one at a time and we're not overwhelming our mentors. Okay, Julie, thank you for starting us off.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all being here. So one of the biggest barriers that I anticipate is shifting the culture to be more proactive. And there's an educational piece to my project as well. Any advice on kind of or strategies for in a space that might not be, I guess that would require shifting of paradigms. I don't know if that question is clear enough. Maybe not.
Oh, Mavis, I think Mavis was going to give it a go.
Oh,
so
okay.
Mavis. No, it's clear enough. It's just a tough process, because educating the consumer, if they're not already, if the value isn't already obvious, or if the customer has to switch or actively get involved in making that choice, it makes it harder. So I think the key is to start with sort of what are the key characteristics of the market that could easily switch over, or that sort of are already there and looking for a solution, and they become your early adopters and advocates. And then trying to find ways to sort of lessen the pain of the switch for some of the next tier of the segment. So in this, as I understand it, you're sort of giving market segments and features of those segments. So it's really about understanding what you're asking of the customer to switch, and then finding those populations to talk to. And you may have to use different language for each of those segments. So I don't know what it is that you're working on, but say in the environmental sector, which is the usual, you're asking for people to go, above and beyond what their normal day-to-day activity is, and just giving the reasons why it's a good thing, especially when there's economic impacts. You have to give them numerous values. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you will find those early adopters to help you sell the features.
Thank
And
you.
find examples of some that have done that before. So if there's role model companies that you've seen in the past that have sort of made that switch or got people to make that switch, then figuring out what their methodology is and adopting it to your product.
Perfect. Thank you, Mavis. Did any of our other mentors want to weigh in or have anything else to add to maybe what Mavis has already put forward? Yes,
Yeah, I can.
Andrew.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
go Andrew.
Sorry, Andrew and
Hi,
then Wendy.
Andrew.
Sure. So if you're looking at sort of like all the technologies, like if you look at, let's say, Uber or whatnot, or Airbnb, like the way that they shifted the dynamics was really to understand the pain points of the customer. And, building upon what Mavis said is how you actually pitch how your technology or your product is going to help them alleviate those pain points needs to be very, very clear. And so by understanding what they need and what their problems are, it'll be easier for you to offer your solution to that. And whether that be a very, very big paradigm shift or tweaks or whatnot to the models that they're already using, for example.
Thank you, Andrew. Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, that's Andrew's point is a part of my suggestion as well. Pinpoint. You need to find what the customers needs, and that's why we need to do customer research and do some survey and understand what people are using, what people benefit, and what's their challenge for them. So based on that, you can emphasize your solution, your product, your service can solve the problem. And the second point I want to make is that based on your product or service as an entrepreneur, as a startup, you also want to find out your value proposition, right? You can convince the customers that you can provide either better product or faster service or cheaper, cheaper offerings. So either better or faster or cheaper. So which one is yours? So if you can convince that you can provide all these benefits or one of them to customers, they will have the reason to switch to yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Karine, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I'm not quite sure if I got the question. Is it culture shifting that you're asking about?
Yes.
Or is it consumer behavior? Because if it's culture shifting, it depends. Like it really depends on your demographic. I think the softest ways is to have someone that can represent that culture being in alignment with the change that you're trying to believing, like we said, early adopters. Because I think sometimes when it comes to culture, some of the deepest beliefs of the customer can be rooted in so many things that it can be hard to connect, right? So for example, and I'll take the example as a Black, I was looking for the Black hands emoji and I just saw the yellow hands emoji. But for example, if you're targeting a specific demographic, and when you say culture, I'm not quite sure to what extent of culture we talk about, but I think being able to connect with people that are leaders, that other people consider leaders, that have a strong connection bond, that can root for your product and then believe in what you're doing, that could get you along with connecting and being able to shift culture, because culture is really hard to shift because it's really tied into different beliefs and different background and stuff like that. So once you identify your customer and you do all the marketing things, I think the best guess to having the connection is to at least finding a leader or some sort of public figure that people listen to and can identify to and have that person a part of the project. That's what I would say.
So partly finding that champion, right? That's somebody that can, adopt early and take the lead on that. So thank you very much. That was super insightful. Ellery, go ahead.
Just some additional context, I think, for Julie. We were chatting in one of the smaller groups, and she has an HR tool. And so I just suggested maybe the mentors can comment on finding somebody that's an early adopter, but also somebody that has the ability to execute a budget, right? Because, let's say her target might have been University of Manitoba in her mind, but you could chase that customer forever, and that person, unless you have that conversation with them, they might be very interested but not actually able to officially become an early adopter because they don't have that, the span of control or the autonomy over their budget. So just another factor to consider, I think.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ellery. Does anyone have any other questions? Actually, I think I want to jump in with something here, if I may. So one of my team members, my group, is really looking for a healthcare solution. And I've seen many people come up with what looks to be very, very robust, integrated, AI-driven healthcare solutions, and yet somehow we can't get those moving forward. We can't get the buy-in. Government says yes, doctors say no, clinics want it. How do you navigate that? So Mavis, thank you. I think you must have some experience because your hand went up pretty fast.
Well, because a couple of reasons, but your test market is going to be a key, and you don't want the biggest one on the block. I think you want to have your challenges and mistakes and missteps and learning done with a smaller client that that's willing to provide feedback, so that you can start building those testimonials and building the sort of path to the user using it, and then go after the bigger clients. The institutional buyers are tough because the user is not the decision maker. The decision maker doesn't know what the user necessarily needs, and then there's a level of administrative approval depending on everything, like security, how it changes their processes. And so if you're just starting out, you may want to start with a smaller case sample. So it could be a smaller university, smaller college, smaller, if it's an educational institution driven or whatever your application is. I think you want to find the small ones, and it may mean that you're offering for free as a test case, or looking at some of the research grants to run that pilot and test case. And then understanding what benefits they get and getting the testimonials, and that's your early adopter. But going after the large companies, and we've tried that with like medical devices or anything like that, where you're trying to get somebody to use it within the system, but it's a multi-layer, and with medical devices, you've got insurers that weigh in on whether or not they can use it. So find the simplest of your customers that fit first, and learn your lessons from that, and you get your testimonials from that then can apply to those bigger clients.
I think that's really good advice. And I think about it in terms of scalability. We look at a problem, we think, I can fix this whole big problem. I just need everybody to buy in. And we forget that we just need to start small for a variety of reasons. Financial is part of it, but also in terms of that customer experience and ensuring that we really understand what we think we understand about the market and how it's working. So that's super great advice. Thank you. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that or have any other questions? Oh, you guys had lots of questions this morning, so here's your opportunity. Oh, there we go. Shabab, thank you.
Hi, so this question is about scaling up companies. Might be a little bit different from the discussion we have had this morning. My question is regarding strategies that you guys might have come across over your career as you have worked with different companies. The technology that we are trying to develop is a hard technology, and it's also capital intensive. Nowadays, as I see, lots of startups and lots of new companies are mostly AI driven, and I see that the capital investment required to gain some quick traction is not too much. By not too much, I think it's I would say it's less. It's not in the order of millions. So, what are your thoughts and feedback or opinions in terms of identifying some ideal strategies for scaling capital intensive hard technologies that would have higher benefits and good returns, let's say after a long runway of, let's say, 5 to 10 years? Any insights on that? Thank you.
Who'd like to jump in from our mentor pool? Thank you, Kareen. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the experience that we had was actually working with an MBA student that was working on a medical device within the health, like really for overdosage, reverse effect. So I think, first of all, it's the team. Like at this stage, when we talked about scalability, you shouldn't be one person running your startup. You need a business developer, you need expert, you need a board of advisors, you need people that really know what to do, what to say in front of who, especially in the healthcare, in the health sector, and coming up with brand new technology. Like, you really need to focusing on building a team of professional, of people that are expert, whether on the product or on sales, on building partnerships. And we cannot expect one founders to have all of these skills. So that was the first thing that I've noticed. The second thing is they started with a province that had flexible regulations for medical devices, testing and stuff like that. So sometimes, like we talked, sometimes you enter like an industry that's very highly regulated. Other people will even start in the States just because the regulation are a little bit more flexible. So there's a little bit of market research, industry market research that you have to do when you do your SWOT, when you look at the industry and you list the strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. You really want to start in a place, in a province, or starting somewhere where the regulations are allowing this type of technology to flourish, that it's not that complicated to get faster on the market compared to other countries or other provinces. So I'll say those two things can be strategy, like how to build the team and really where to start, like what will be your game plan if you were to launch such device, and really looking at regulations and how other similar technologies are doing. I think the things that people don't take advantage is competition. It's just, it's competition is great. It's not a threat all the time. You have people with similar technology that for some reason you can find a way to build relationship, and I don't know if you have to create a fake profile for that, but your competition is really your greatest ally when you are entering a regulated industry, just really trying to figure out how they've done it. So you can kind of incorporate that in your strategy. So
thank you, Kareen. I think that's really good advice. And learning to balance priorities is so difficult in the early stages of a startup, and having some help and support, it can be critical. So thank you. Mavis, go ahead, please.
One way that you can get into capital intensive projects is to look at partnering with applied research colleges. So if you're looking at prototypes, so Red River College had a large prototype go on the road in the electric bus business, and that went through applied research grants where various departments are working together as well as with industry. So if you have industry buy-in on the idea and need to test it, there are research grants that are different than the university that actually put those working prototypes to work and get it on the road. So you will have multiple partners and multiple stakeholders in that type of scenario, and you'll build a one-off. You can also look at whether or not there's a smaller scale that could be done. So in the case of the electric bus, they could have, if their partner wasn't New Flyer at the time, they could have looked at a smaller vehicle to run that type of battery through, and then look at how that scales to a larger. I look at extruders in the food industry, same thing. Can get multi-million technology and extruders around that, but at a pilot scale. So it's really understanding how big do you need it to be to test out, and then find the partners and the research grants.
So there's a bit of a follow-up question just in the chat, and it was, could you comment on strategies or the right way of building a team when you're starting from scratch? So I'm not sure if you're comfortable with commenting on that, Mavis.
Usually it depends on the stage of business you're at. Like if you're still at very much a prototype and commercialization stage, you will always need someone in there that's looking at design and ability to manage, like project managers. So they're not just the technical person, they're the one that can do all the bits and pieces of supplies, managing your budget. As you start to get closer to market, then you're adding in new talent where you're looking at your sales and business development team. So it's a bit of a piece. Where do you find them? Often it comes down to some of the networking, asking around. It depends on what you're offering in terms of that business plan, like what your vision in the business plan is, and you're almost using that business plan to sell it to the partners that you want to bring on. So at any given point, you have, probably about 5 different versions of a business plan, depending on if you want money or you want partners. And what their role and what the benefit is to them, because usually they would be leaving one opportunity to join your opportunity. So you really have to state why that would be interesting, and that usually comes through connections and networking.
Yeah, so to that point, linking with people. So I've had a couple of you request to link me on LinkedIn. Be shameless. Build that network, get in front of people, talk to people, as you continue to grow, getting involved maybe in an incubator program where there's a team of entrepreneurs and residents, tapping into programs like U of M has or Red River has. Those are all really, really critical. Because you're going to get the expertise you need when you need that expertise. And, from the financial side, on the money side, maybe this was talking about partnerships. There's also things you can do in terms of tax strategies. So things like the scientific research and development tax credit, for example, that's not for right now, but it's down the road. So, and you want to find those people when you need them, and that's part of it. And that network will help you with that. So, Wendy, go ahead. Sorry, we just were chatting here.
Oh, no, don't say sorry. Well, these are all very great points. And I just want to remind everybody, think about Microsoft and Apple company. When they just started their company, the main people are 2, right? So for Microsoft, Bill Gates and Paul Allen, and one is for internal, like technology and the innovation, and Paul is taking over the marketing outside to promote their product and to do the marketing campaign and to convince people to use like a Microsoft product. So the same as the Apple company. So Steve Jobs also has a partner. Sorry, I forget his name. But also Steve takes over internal, and his business partner takes external, because we are innovative companies. We create and develop new products. So we need the person who help us to push the product to the market. So I would say, at the very beginning, maybe you need a team who can focus on the developing the prototype. But after you have the prototype, it's also the key person who can help you to, push the product to the market to get people know it. And the person who knows how to market really means a lot to the company, to the team. And I think that's my main point.
Thank you, Wendy. Go ahead, Andrew. And then there is a question in the chat, so I'll grab that question after we hear from Andrew. Oh, you're on mute, Andrew.
Sorry, thank you. So I was just reading into the sort of the big comment. So how to find like people that you can work with and building upon that networking aspect too is there's a lot of competitions like in the community, whether it's pitch competitions, whether it's hackathons, whether it's like if you're in Winnipeg, for example, the North4 Technology Exchange has their sort of I think biannual or annual event that you can actually get to work with people that have similar mindset to you starting a business, and then you might be able to talk to people and just figure that you do work very well with certain individuals. So I think that's one way of you finding a business partner or finding people that can help you scale based on the diverse skill sets that they bring to the table.
Perfect, thank you. So Ali had typed a question here in the chat. So why do investors, buyers typically look for, or what do they look for in early stage Lab2Market startup? What key strengths should we highlight more? So I certainly want to hear from the mentors. I do want to just sort of preface how that in a bit, Ali, in the sense that that's probably a bit down the road. I mean, that may be more of a down the road question. Because until we know there's a market, I mean, one of the things that investors are going to look for is whether or not you have a defined market and you have a revenue model and you can demonstrate either the opportunity to make sales or that you've got some sort of letter of intent that people do want to buy from you. So those are some keys. But Dimitri, did you want to jump in before I move to the mentors?
I'm just going to hold off on my comment because you started that question. I want to stay on that question. I'll circle back on the last question.
Okay,
perfect. Thanks. Mavis, go ahead, please.
If you want to tag it to this particular lesson, which is about customer segmentation and market, one of the key things that they're looking for is, have you really defined the market and is it big enough to get the type of return on investment that they're looking for? So what they don't want to see is that your technology can be used by everybody, and they'll have to buy it every year. So you really want to, from a customer point of view, you want to hone in on what this market is and how it's growing and how you can grow it, and what's the repeat sale or the carry on from that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things that mentors or the investors will look for that I'm sure will be covered in the sections like management team and experience and IP and all of that stuff. But from a customer segmentation point of view, like, for example, when we looked at taking a medical device to hospitals, it was less interesting to investors than when we miniaturized it and said we could put this same type of device in every pharmacy across Canada and the US. And oh, by the way, you would make money off of being able to charge. So you can buy this, and then your revenue model, the customer's revenue model will look like this. So you need that kind of detail when you're trying to pick the market that you want to go into.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you, Mavis, for tying it back into customer segmentation. Andrew, please go ahead. Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
I keep
that's
hitting the wrong button. So I think one of the big things really is understanding whether the team has the expertise and the knowledge to actually execute on what you're proposing to do, or to carry on development if you already have a prototype, for example. I think a lot of that has to do with just trust in the founders or for the people that are developing technology. So if you can somewhat demonstrate that in terms of CVs, in terms of projects, in terms of the prototype, for example, it just gives people or the buyers, investors a lot more confidence that you can actually accomplish what you hope to deliver and what you propose.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Dimitri, looping back to you.
All right, so just playing off of what Andrew was saying and that whole subject of finding founders, finding people to work with. You don't want to be, and I've said this before, looking for random founders to connect with that you don't know anything about and saying, hey, they have a skill set, let me bring them on. You are pretty much wanting to know a little bit more about them, whether you're working on a project with them, whether you're in school with them, whether you've worked at some job site with them. That knowledge of that person, that intimate knowledge, is part of that decision-making process. So there has to be this synergy between you. There has to be this confidence that this person is someone you can work with and someone that will add to your team. Having said that, we're starting this process early with you folks. When we bring you into our socials, when we bring you into the ecosystem at North Forge and give you opportunities to mingle and mix and network, what you're doing is you're exploring persons and personalities, getting acquainted, building relationships, increasing your network of assets. And that way, as you move forward, because this is early in the game, you're not looking for co-founders at this point. At this point, you're looking to get through a learning curve. You're looking to become a better entrepreneur. You're looking to be able to talk entrepreneur so that when you do start talking to venture entrepreneurs who also are going through the same process in their lane. We're in our lane, academia. They're in their lane over there doing the same thing, this early stage. At some point, we get to talk the same language. If we're meeting each other along the way, you will find people that you say, well, I need this person, or they will say, I need you. Those relationships won't happen unless you start to kind of be part of this customer ecosystem that we're building in Manitoba. Important to get out of the building, get connected, start talking to people, start meeting people, mentors included, experts, subject matter experts. You'll meet some VCs and some angel investors along the way to talk to and ask questions to. That doesn't happen if you stay home in your basement in front of your computer. It happens when you go to these events and you start to mingle and mix. Go ahead, guys.
Oh, thank you, Dimitri. And I think that is a really good point. And I know that some of you, even with your customer interviews or, your market interviews, you're feeling like this is hard to get started. But all of these things start to happen when you talk to people, right? And you might not be talking to your direct customer, but it may be a person that says, this is a really great idea. And I have somebody else you should talk to who might want to support you or could support you in a different way that you never thought of. So please, please, please talk to people. You will be amazed at where opportunities come from. And business is always fascinating to me because things come at you sideways and you think, wow, I talked to that person like 3 months ago, and now they're coming to find me because they saw value in what I was doing. So super important to do those things. Karine, go ahead, and then we'll go back to Wendy.
Okay, thank you. So I'm probably gonna talk about my personal experience with finding a co-founder, which I have not yet found a co-founder. It is hard. And I think there's many components to that because you're talking equity, you're talking non-disclosure agreement, you're talking something so confidential that for your own good, you just don't want someone that's gonna say, yes, I want to be a co-founder and say, hey, yes, be a co-founder. I think there's many things that as the originator of the idea that you need to master. And even if it's not the technical skills, like for example, we talked about project manager. You're gonna bring someone like, what are they gonna do? What level of access do you want to give them? So I think my experience, even as a solo entrepreneur, is just I was more comfortable bootstrapping and hiring student for specific, like almost breaking down the project into mini part and finding help to bring the masterpiece together to a point where at that point you have so much going on for yourself that you're going to bring along people that you can trust, people that have the expertise. Because I know we talked about, hey, go network, bring people, but it can be frightening to bring the one person on board, maybe stealing your idea or destroying the platform because they really said they have the skills, but they don't have the skills. So I'll say even finding a co-founder, there's a little bit of process into that you have to think about. And you have mentors, you have people in the industry that can guide you. If that's the road you want to go for, but I think the safest road is contracting or finding people that are partially a part of the project without knowing too much, but can still get you along like one step at a time to get to a point where you have a full prototype, but now you have something more substantial. You have experience project management. You know exactly what someone needs to do, although you can't do it. You can still know what someone needs to do without doing it. That's the whole project management, but you have a little bit more substance to bring people along. So that would be what I'm gonna say.
I think that's a really good point, Carrie. And I've seen some things go very badly very quickly when you've hired the wrong tech developer. I've seen tech that's been held hostage or that has been stolen, and in the CPA world, I see people say that they are accountants and they are not. Do your due diligence. Ask for a reference, follow up, talk to some people. Who are some of the other customers you work for? Who can I talk to? Verify the credentials and make sure that it's the right fit for you, because those mistakes can be extremely costly. So thank you so much. Wendy, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. I think I want to answer the question related to, Ali and Javi.
Yes, please,
Okay.
please do. So
Okay.
can I just read out Javad's question? I don't think I quite got there. So just in case everyone hasn't seen it, Javad was asking, how can we ensure customer segments remain engaged and loyal to my product over the long term? Do we need to consider some metrics right now for discovering customers to get as many loyal customers as possible? So yeah, perfect. Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah. Okay. I think these two questions are related because Ali mentioned what do investors or buyers typically look for in early stage lab-to-market startups? What's the key strengths should they highlight more? So I would say definitely investors and buyers, they focus on different things. I don't think they look for exactly the same thing from the innovative startups. But one of the important things they are looking for, both of them look for, is the innovation. Keep innovating. Keep, whether this company, whether this startup, keeps innovating new technologies to their product or service. So think about an investor. If you want to ask for money, if you want to raise fund from the investor, you definitely want to convince them that, well, look, in the future, this would be our business. This would be the revenue, the profit. So they will ask you, what will you do with my funding? What will you do with the money? So if you don't show that a part of the funding goes to innovation, it's not convincing because they would feel that your business will stop just in a couple of years. It's not like a continuing developing business. And that's also the same what a customer looks for. Because a customer, Javid mentioned the question, how to keep loyal customers. To be honest, it's very difficult to have loyal customers nowadays because so many options, so many alternatives. If you don't have a new or exciting product, I can just switch to your competitors. So it's very easy for customer to go to your competitors. So that means for the startups, for any business, you need to keep your product exciting. And exciting, such as the iPhone, right? So now it's already iPhone 14, 15 or 14. So they just keep updating the generation after generation. Every generation, they have some exciting innovation. So that means that in that case, you can keep the loyal customers. But if you just stop and people just feel it's boring and they are used to it, they get bored by your product, then they just give up and switch to the competitors.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Wendy. So that's a really good point. So when iPhone introduces its next version, it's doing it based on good customer research. So this is not a one and done. We're not, all of these skills that we're asking you to develop now are going to be an ongoing part and should be embedded in the culture of your company, because successful companies are continuously assessing changing customer needs, changes to markets, and ways that they can pivot to remain number one in terms of customer choice. So this is an ongoing process. So these skills here right now are going to be part of your, fabric as a company moving forward. So Mavis, go ahead, please.
One of the things that I think I'd challenge the group to do while they're looking at this, we're all customers. So as you sort of go through this process and you go to make a decision or you look around your your homes, your labs, whatever, and why have those choices been made. Kind of walk through the process of what it is that draws you to it, what would make you leave. Now it's funny that you brought up Apple, because I had switched over from using PC to Apple and sort of started buying all the things, but I wouldn't say that I'm well, because each time Apple adds another thing or makes me buy another little piece or changes an adapter, it makes me less inclined to stick with them and move over. So analyze your choices, because that's how, if you're going consumer to consumer, some of those choices are being made. Business to business is completely different, because you have to understand the business unit and then what drives that business unit. So again, multiple decision makers, there's pricing, there's switching costs that you'll all get into. But a good thing to do is, as an entrepreneur, study human behavior and starting with yourself in terms of how do you make decisions and how do you pick products.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you very much. It is getting close to, oh, perfect. Rosemary, I was just going to say, I think we have time for one more question, so go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have a question regarding the insecurities of the customers. So I can put this question specific to our product. So we are developing a digital platform that enables the patients to find the right doctor on right time to get the optimal and timely care in Canada. So the beneficiaries for this product would be ideally like patients or general public in Canada, whoever wants to book a doctor. But the customers who will be like actually buying the product would be the clinics or the primary care clinics. That's what we are targeting. So when we think about patients or general public, it is understood that they're happy to, I mean, they would be happy to use this application where they can see the availability of doctors or give reviews about doctors or anything like that, which is what I understood from the interviews. But when I approached the clinics, they have a concern about being transparent about their doctor availability or about their reviews or anything like that. So the actual customer segment, who are clinics in our case, are worried about being exposed or something like that. So how do we actually solve that issue, or how can I approach to solve that problem?
Any of our mentors? Oh, thank you, Mavis. And then we'll go to
Something that comes to mind is almost the Uber model, where you have the doctors being rated, but also the patients being rated. The problem with sort of that open forum of rating is that if somebody doesn't get the answer they want, but they did get proper care, it's pretty hard for the person to assess that. I mean, they could have come in belligerent, they may not have listened to advice. So I could see where the doctors have some issue with that. So, building in a feedback mechanism that way might help with the transparency of it. I know I do that with, if I'm looking at a travel website and you see somebody who's sort of complaining, you sort of go through and figure out whether or not that person is just a complainer or if they do have a legitimate issue in there. So you might be able to build in some of those safeties or some of those assurances for the clinics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, some of them are worried about losing their clients by let's say if we can see the wait time at particular clinic, like this is such a long wait time, definitely the patients would go to another clinic where they can find the right doctor. So yeah, doctors have a concern like that as well, like when they put the availability like open to everyone. So it's shared between like every clinics as well. So yeah, they do have concern about the flow of patients as well, whether they would lose.
Perhaps the clinics aren't your customer base then, because I'm sure that a lot of customers would love to see the wait times and be able to switch. So maybe it's not the clinics, but Manitoba Healthcare or something. So I think you might have to figure out the better route, perhaps, that that solves that problem.
And Rosmi happens to be in Alberta, so you know that is provincial. It's provincial jurisdiction. So figuring out who in the provincial government, and there are the ADMs. So assistant deputy ministers do have people. They want to solve the healthcare issues as well. There are typically people that are available that you can book an appointment with and chat about these things. So they are. I know they are in Manitoba. I'm sure that Alberta Health has got something similar. So, Karine, did you have some comments as well?
Yes, I think those are great feedback. That's what I wanted to say. Because the prototyping goal is to get these feedback and find a way to have them as features. Because you don't want people to just say, yes, we're going to be on your platform. You want them to say, no, because of that. I want that. I'll go there if I can have that, if I can see that. So and I agree with Mavis that maybe the end buyers may not be the clinic, but if that's the business model that you are going for, then you have to ask yourself, why 5 times? What's the real problem? Why do doctors not want other people to see what they're doing? What's up with the scheduling? Maybe the reviews, you can have extra layers there of protection to make sure that the reviews goes to maybe the clinic admin person, and they will investigate, and that can be something that they will be excited, or that can be something we don't have staff to do that, right? So I think the goal when prototyping or when building, when getting feedback so precise like that, is to really keep asking yourself, why are people getting to the root problem and bring something that will alleviate the problem for your customers, right? And that's the functional. That's what you need to figure out in your prototyping. Like, how do people will do the reviews without being exposing the clinic or the doctors, but still being able to have the customer happy and the clinic happy. That's the innovation aspect of figuring out how to fix the problem with your prototype. So welcome those feedbacks. Go back and map again the project, map again the app, map again your platform, and take all these feedback as questions that you need to provide answers for.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you, Karine.
I think, thank you, Karine. That's really good feedback. I think the other thing to consider, Rosmi, is that this is an inefficient market. It operates as a monopoly, right? And I think sometimes we need to think about the landscape in which we're trying to operate. Doctors don't have an incentive to lose patients because of wait lists, but if we could speak to them about being able to manage their clinics more efficiently, to manage patients without losing them, I think maybe flipping that the way you're looking at that as well could be. But I think also understanding that, and then the government has a vested interest, and healthcare is politically charged, politically motivated, and the other piece of that is any government that gets elected in only has 4 years to do something, right? So there's lots of layers, but I think you're asking the right questions and you're digging down and getting some of those answers. So we are at 5:02. So there's one more question. I think this will probably be our last question of the day. I think we did touch on this a little bit, Tay, but how do you build your initial team, and what roles are crucial in the early stages? So I do think Mavis talked a little bit about building that team, but also the second part of that is, what is the key to maintaining a balance between technical and business side? So how do you, where do you focus your effort? Do you focus your effort on your tech and your research, or do you focus your effort on, business and trying to figure out how to structure yourself? Where's the priority? Any thoughts? If I might, go ahead, Mavis, you go ahead.
So this could be, in my opinion, I think that if you're going to the business and the investors, that you have a lot of the technical side sort of worked through at some of this parts, and now you are going to become a business. It's moving out of the research lab, so you're not going to want to perfect your prototype as it goes to market. You have to get to that place where it's close enough so that you can get some initial users in there. And so I think that is the stage. Once you're into the business side, you don't have to, put a full court press on every piece of the business aspect, because you will be, potentially moving slow. But I think that if it's a tech-led company, you have to resist the urge to continue to go back and tinker with it without getting some of that customer feedback. So you're going to flip between the two, where you get a prototype out, you get some consumer feedback, and then if there's major issues, that gets fixed. But you still keep the business moving, because as you get investors in, they will start to become impatient if you're constantly tinkering. So it's sort of giving that assessment of how business ready you are, or market ready you are.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think it is a bit of a balancing act. And you do need that MVP out there, getting feedback and recognizing that tech development will continue for future iterations, but you also need to be operational and running, and being able to demonstrate to investors that they've either made a good investment or that you are worthy of their investment dollars to continue to move your business forward. So it is 3 minutes to 2. So in the spirit of keeping things on time, I am going to just say thank you very much to all of our mentors. We really appreciate you taking the time today to come out and talk to us. I know that everything you've shared today has been of tremendous value, certainly to me, but certainly to our participants, our students. And to the students, please reminding you to, now that you've put some names and faces to our mentors, reach out, start thinking about those mentor meetings. If there is something you couldn't ask today, but you think Karine or Wendy or Andrew would be able to help you gain some additional insights, book that meeting. I believe the mentor contact info is on the mentor portal. If you do not know where that is, Amanda is amazing at providing links to all of those things. And maybe if Amanda just could send out a link to everybody. Sorry, Amanda, don't mean to make it work for you, but for that mentor portal, just so that we can encourage people to start booking those mentor appointments. So thank you. Sorry, Amanda, did I cut you off?
No, just that I'll be able to post that in Slack. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you, everyone. That was great. And I'm sure we will hear from more mentors next week, and we're looking forward to that.
Thank you to the mentors.
Yes, thank you to the mentors.
Thank you, everyone.
And before the mentors kick off, in the spirit of all of that last part that we did, before the mentors, we're going to be inviting you into the hashtag mentor/entrepreneur channel on our Slack channel. Guys, you can ask your questions there. Mentors, you can tap in asynchronously in there and have some connection with our participants along the way. We will also be trying to invite you to our socials every 2 weeks. So next Thursday, there'll be a social online between 5 and 6. We'll invite, totally optional for the mentors, but if you want to duck in and sit in a very organic, informal setting and just kind of get to meet and know some of our participants, that's a great place to invite. And then, of course, I am working the LinkedIn. Why am I working the LinkedIn? Because it's a connection to mentors, facilitators, alumni, other subject matter experts who are going to be popping in, people in the ecosystem that you can connect with and actually create some wonderful leads through. So just before, that's it. That's all I want to say. I want to release the mentors, and I want to release all of you guys. Stick around, the participants, because I have a couple of more announcements and then we'll go. But mentors, thank you very much. You are released.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whew. All right, we did good. Now, our next social is not this week, but next week. So watch for that. I will put out an invitation and you can join us between 5 and 6. I know that we had a great time. That's what the impression I got, some good feedback from that. So the good virtual network, again, I'm working on building this informal drop in, and you don't know who you're going to meet in that session, the social session. Every month, the first Friday of every month, we have an in-person social for those who are local here in Manitoba. So any students who want to come and meet people in person in the North Forge Incubator Accelerator space, where you want to kind of explore the space, you want to talk to some of the entrepreneurs on that side, some of the specialists and experts are going to show up. You never know who you're going to meet there and what kind of opportunity comes from that. And again, work the LinkedIn, join the Lab2Market Prairies LinkedIn. You will meet some past alumni there that are interacting. You'll see them being featured there. You'll see what they're doing today. And then you can ask them some questions on how they got there and what they learned from the program and what were their blockers and how did they get past them and stuff like that. So I'm going to start saying lots of things about networking and finding opportunities to do that with us and the rest of the ecosystem. Let's see, what else did I want to say here? So in Notions, it was mentioned that there's a mentor portal. If you go there, you will find descriptions of the mentors again. You'll find their explanation on how you can schedule meetings with them. It's up to you, not them, to schedule meetings. We made a target of at least 3 one-on-ones, whether it's with the same mentor or several of the mentors, that you should use that as a quota as to how many people you want to meet. That's a minimum. You can meet with them 20 times. Doesn't matter. The idea there is that you're getting one-on-one custom time for you, where you are the exclusive person they're paying attention to, and you can ask your questions. They may introduce you to some leads. They may steer you to the right people to talk to. The idea is that they understand what's going on, and they've worked with lots and lots of people and they've helped them before. So you want to harness that power and that energy. Tomorrow, open drop-in office hours. I know they're optional. And if any of you want to come and see us about anything that is keeping you up at night, that you're struggling with, that you need an answer to, just pop in between 11 and 2, same link as this Zoom call right now. If facilitators want to join us with one of their participants to work through something, arrange to pop in during that time. We just leave the channel open for 3 hours, and whoever shows up, we work with. I think that's everything. I don't want to I know we're getting a little tired right now, so I'll just say is if there is a question, hang back a little bit and we'll answer it. If there isn't any more questions, you are released, and we will see you again in all the different ways that we like to see you.